Welcome to the installation demo screencast for Rails on Ubuntu version 8.04 Hardy Heron, as you can tell by the lovely desktop background we have here. To get started, we're just going to take a look around. This is a clean installation, so I shouldn't have Ruby installed, but you never know. It's always better to know before you go anywhere. So we'll do ruby-v, and we get a message that Ruby is not currently installed. So rather than do what they suggest, which is to do it from the command line, we're actually going to use a package manager. Now, Ubuntu Desktop does offer an add remove option under applications, but that operates at a much higher level of granularity than what we actually want. So we're going to go to the System menu, Administration, and the Synaptic Package Manager. It'll ask you for your administrative password. Just like doing it with sudo, you need to demonstrate that you're allowed to do these things. And we'll hit OK. And the package manager will read its package lists and give us a gigantic list of possible options. The ones that we actually want, at least for starters, are the ones that have Ruby. And that will still bring us a large set of packages, but at least it'll bring us a slightly smaller set. So if we look around, we find Ruby itself someplace down here under all the libraries. And we definitely want to install Ruby. We'll mark it for installation. What it's actually going to install is version 1.8 of both Ruby and libruby. So we'll mark those. And we'll give ourselves a little more space to actually see what's going on here. There's also a package just below here, Ruby 1.8 dev, which you don't need to install just to get Rails started, but you will want to have fairly quickly if you want to install Mongrel or other packages. There are a couple of other pieces we need to get that have Ruby in their names, so we'll go look up in the libraries, which are gigantic. The key piece for our database access, at least initially, will be libsqlite 3, which will install the 1.8 version. And we're also going to need a library for OpenSSL, which will allow Rails to actually build applications in the first place. So libopenssl Ruby, mark it for installation. Again, it's the 1.8 version. There are a few other components that we're going to want to find which are not actually Ruby in the name. One is IRB, which gives us a Ruby command line, and is up here. IRB, marked for installation. And another one is RDoc, which will give us the Ruby documentation system. And you could install most of these later. You'll just collide and get lots of error messages if you try to install things that depend on them and don't have them already installed. There are a couple of other things we should check on to make sure that they're already installed, basically to prevent nasty surprises later. One of them is OpenSSL, the actual library, not the connection to it through Ruby. And it probably is. It's pretty fundamental. Yep, you can see right here that it's already installed. And the other thing that we'll check for is SQLite 3. And we'll search on that. And there it is. It's already installed. So at this point, it should be safe just to go ahead and hit the Apply button. You'll be asked to confirm what exactly you want to do. The libraries, Ruby, RDoc, IRB. And we'll hit Apply. And it'll start by downloading, then it will process the packages. This is going to take a little bit of time. Okay, once it's finished applying all of the changes, you can close this, and you can close the package manager. Eventually you can close the package manager. Now we should be able to test Ruby. It's there, it's version 1.8.6. Now we have all of the language infrastructure installed and we have database infrastructure, but we need to add some pieces that will make them all come together. The next piece that we need to install is called gems. Gems is a package manager, kind of like the Synaptic or the apt-get stuff that we saw, but it's specific to Ruby and pretty specific to tools developed on the RubyForge site. So the place to go to get gems is going to be the RubyForge site. And here we are. So rubyforge.org. The software over here we want is Ruby Gems. You'll see a lot of options come up here because it's used by lots of packages, but the one we want is called Ruby Gems itself. We're specifically looking for the download, Ruby Gems 1.2.0, download. And here we see a list of all of the different versions. The one that we want is this top one. It's a TGZ tar archive. And we'll save that link. And we'll put it in my home directory, which your home directory will probably have a different name. But in any case, that will download it. It's there. We can close this up and minimize Firefox. So if we look around now, there's the Ruby Gems 1.2.0.tgz file. We'll expand the archive with the tar command and get ourselves a Ruby Gems directory. That all seemed to work quite nicely. So the next step is to change into the directory Ruby Gems 1.2.0. If you take a look around, you'll see that there's a setup.rb file, which we're going to want to call with Ruby. Now you have to be in administrative mode. You have to be sudo ruby setup.rb. Enter your password, and it will install a bunch of things, including a lot of documentation. The documentation always seems to take a while. Once Gems is installed, you'll get this nice message, and you can see at the bottom that Ruby Gems installed an executable as gem 1.8. Most of the documentation for Rails talks about gems being just gem, so we're going to take a quick trip to the user bin directory, and we're going to create a symbolic link from gem 1.8 to gem, and you have to be a super user to do that. I just remembered, so we'll put sudo in front of that. And that should be fine. We'll go back to our home directory. And now it's time to just install Rails. So, sudo gem install Rails. You'll get the latest version of Rails, which I think as of today is 2.1. And gem will also include any dependencies that are needed for your installation. There's a bit of a pause as it gets all of its files together, and then there's a very long pause as the documentation installs. Once you have the documentation installed, and you will be waiting for a little while, it's time to actually try Rails and see how it does. So we'll just do Rails test, and it created a whole bunch of files, so something good must have happened. We'll change directories to test. Take a look around. That's what we're supposed to see. Probably the best way to try things out is to create a scaffold. So to do that, we're going to use the one that is explored pretty thoroughly in Chapter 5 of Learning Rails. It's a scaffold for a person, which just contains a name of string. And Rails generated a number of files here. To set up the database for the application, we're going to call rake-db-migrate, and this will create a table for people and their names. And this shows that we're actually connected to the database, among other things, because creating the table worked. So now we can just go ahead and run the application using the script server command. Ruby will fire up WebBrick, and we can go to our web browser and visit localhost 3000 because it uses port 3000 as its default, and the application will be at people. And sure enough, we're listing people. We can test things out by creating a new person. We'll create Dracula. And that looks good. We'll go back. Our options are show, edit, and destroy. I don't often get to end a screencast by destroying somebody important, so we'll destroy poor Dracula. Okay, everything works. It looks like we're in business. One last thing is you can switch back here. You can see the logs, and Control-C will bring the server to an end.